My father. My father stirred a vision in me to do the kinds of things that I'm doing right now. My father loved to see me speak and hear me speak. I miss my father a lot. My father was really difficult and demanding, but so loving and kind and caring. At my father's viewing, people, many people, came up to me and said, "Your father was one of the toughest guys at the steel mill. Nobody wanted to mess with, but so caring and kind, and always would stand in the gap for his brothers at that mill." It's my dad in the upper right-hand corner a few months before he passed away. That lawnmower there, I said, I sure hope I get to speak to John Deere someday. I gave about 30 talks for them about 10 years ago. I wish my father could have been there. My father had values that he passed on to me. To care for other people, to look out for other people, to put other people in front of yourself at times. Our vision. Clarifying the personal side of safety is so important. Safety's personal, you know? I was with Pacific Gas and Electric earlier in my speaking career, and there was a story there that was passed on, and I'll never forget this story. And we need to think about it as senior leaders so that we could create our own stories, and our workers need to tell stories to each other as well. And it went something like this. They just had 2 fatalities. They called me out to speak in Oakland, California. I was speaking in a large hotel room. Had 500 or 600 people in it. General managers and supervisors and linemen. But there were 2 linemen who took chances. They took shortcuts. They had 40 or 50 years of experience between them, and they both died. This group in front of me was grieving. A number of people got up to speak about the event, and I went to the restroom. I came back, and there was a young lineman up there speaking. I didn't know his whole story, but I caught a part of it. He said, "I got your cards and letters." He said, "Some of you even sent me money." He said, "I appreciate that." All of that made me think. He said, "But my father worked for PG&E, and he came to see me every day in that hospital room." He said, "And I listened to my father because he was a long-time worker at Pacific Gas and Electric." You see, his dad had credibility, expertise, and trust and passion. When we have credibility, and there's lots of credibility in this room, we become believable. People listen to us, and our message is important, because if our message addresses values and the most important things in our lives, then we have a chance to work more and more safely and align our actions with our values. But he said, one evening, my father had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He said, "Son, I know there are times where you think this safety stuff is too much. There's just too much to do, too much paperwork, too much protocol." He said, "I'm here to tell you, make it work for you. We fought to get what you now have. Make it work for you, son." And he started to cry. And I saw lots of people out there start to cry. But then this guy by the name of Dan James got up to speak, and Dan was a part of the safety group, but he worked as a lineman for many, many years. He said, "You know, we grieve the loss of our 2 brothers. We wish they could be here to talk about why they did what they did, seemingly taking shortcuts." He said, "But they're not here, but I think I've earned the right to say what I'm about to say." He said, "There are only a few things I would die for. One is my faith, another is my family, the third is my country, but I will not die for PG&E." He said, "I won't even get hurt for PG&E." Then he said, "The best part, PG&E doesn't want you to die for it or to get hurt for it either, and I'm certain that your leaders feel the same way." Working down the road with TRW Space and Defense, and I brought our people from our machine shop and our maintenance group together one day, and we were clarifying values. We were talking about those things most important in our lives: our family, our friends, our health, our safety. Had this worker by the name of Buddy who didn't like to follow the rules. And he was transferred into a department with this guy by the name of Jack, a CNC machinist, a leader like many of you in the room from within your groups. And Jack was coaching Buddy up every day. He was talking to Buddy. He was giving him positive words of affirmation and confirmation. He was correcting him where necessary. He was getting Buddy involved in more and more safety things. Halfway through this values clarification class, Buddy, that resistant employee, the one who liked to take chances, raised his hand. He said, you know what? Jack's always talking about safety. He's wearing us out. But he's had an impact on my life, he said, because now when I go home for the weekend, when I'm cutting grass, I wear my eye protection. I wear my hearing protection. He said, I want to hear my grandchildren's voices as I grow older. Just south of where I live in western Pennsylvania, there's a battlefield by the name of Fort Necessity. Fort Necessity is just outside of Uniontown, Pennsylvania. It was the beginning of the French and Indian War. And at Fort Necessity, there was a young 22-year-old forced into a leadership role, and he lost in a bloody, ugly, horrific way. His name was George Washington, that George Washington. Now, some 20 years later, he's contemplating the most important decision of his military career. The decision is to cross an icy Delaware River on Christmas night and through the day to attack the best trained and best equipped army in the world, the Hessian army, with his ragtag army from Pennsylvania and Maryland and adjoining colonies. Washington's decision began to creep out and some began to desert him, but as great leaders do, he stood upon his convictions to keep moving forward with his thoughts to cross the icy Delaware River on Christmas night, for the Battle of Trenton was about to begin. We need to remain convicted that raising the bar for safety and having a great safety culture will take us to a whole new level of performance in many ways that will serve you well for the rest of your lives and help you leave a legacy for each other to keep each other safe and whole. But Christmas night came and Washington's decision was rolled out. Before daybreak, his army attacked, and within 90 minutes, that battle was over. It was a bloody, ugly battle. Washington was now alone, being briefed by his best friend, his most trusted ally, Hugh Mercer, and he posed a series of questions to Mercer, some questions that we need to ask of ourselves in a slightly different way. You, tell me, what happened? What just occurred? Mercer said, sir, we have thousands of pounds of ammunition and food and clothing that will take us through the winter. Washington stopped and said, no, that's not what I mean. Washington said, my lads, how are my lads? You see, he first wanted to know about his men, his people. Washington asked, how many did I lose, you Mercer? Mercer smiled ever so slightly and said, none, sir. Some say Washington bowed his head in providential fear, only to lift his head and ask another question. He said, well, how many are injured? Mercer said, none, sir. Washington was overcome with emotions, and he finally asked the last question. The question was why? In his stilted British, he asked, why would these beautiful young lads follow me, you Mercer? Mercer didn't hesitate. He said, they trust you, sir, and I believe they love you. They trust you, sir, and I believe they love you. When we trust each other, when we care deeply for each other, when we coach each other, when we build stronger relationships and recognize that this safety stuff is all about us, and when we have a vision that's clarified for us by our leaders and those who we work closely with, great things will happen. My father loved poetry. There was a great poet from Ireland. His name was George Bernard Shaw, and he once said, I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's like a splendid torch that I've got to hold on to and make burn as brightly as possible before passing it on to future generations. You have a fire and a passion to lead with safety, to lead with safe production, to look out for each other, to care for each other. I always bring one of my father's hats with me because we need signs and symbols to raise the bar for our performance, especially when it comes to safety. This is one of my father's hats that I kept clean, and I take almost everywhere I go when I speak to a great group of people like you. For me, this hat symbolizes the resilience and the perseverance of Sir Ernest Shackleton. To me, it symbolizes coaching people up with the passion and purpose of Vince Lombardi and leading with a servant's heart, much like George Washington. So with my father's hat, with your father's hat, I ask you, how will you begin to lead each other here today? Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
His presentation was empowering, inspirational. It is also involving servant leadership. Servant leadership also involves engaging with and approaching your employees as well as the community. And David Sarkus has embedded that concept. He lives it and breathes it and basically instructs and empowers and inspires employees from multiple companies, including Cluindi.
Bill at our insurance conference. His stories I felt were very relatable. His message was spot on with what we're trying to accomplish at Q&D to improve our safety performance and increase buy-in and getting everybody to kind of understand from the field level up to management, from the management level down. So I thought his message presented a lot of value, and that's why I wanted to bring him out here to our first annual safety summit for Q&D.
Really great, man. Has a lot of good things to say, a lot of good pointers. A lot of it I'll use myself. It's going to help out a lot in the future for me as being a foreman.
Hey, that was a great presentation. I think everybody was really engaged. Looking forward to seeing his impact propagate down into the field over the next few months.